At the end of 1945, the Americans had to face a difficult dilemma. By then, the Axis had been defeated and World War II had come to an end. The Allies had emerged victorious and the United States was positioned as the most important power on the globe. Now it was time to prosecute the German, Italian and Japanese leaders responsible for committing crimes against humanity, such as massacring civilians and defenseless prisoners. Between October and December of that year, it was the turn of General Tomoyuki Yamashita, a Japanese Imperial Army officer accused of committing various war crimes and ordering the clandestine execution of numerous rivals. However, when the investigation began, the court found a moderate man, mild-mannered and kind to his custodians. Yamashita was torn by these atrocities. He claimed that his soldiers had committed the murders without his permission, and the available evidence pointed to this being true. It was now up to the judges to make a decision, a task that was not easy at all. What was at stake was nothing more and nothing less than Yamashita's life. Do not move from your screen, because in the next few minutes we will tell you everything about the only Japanese general repentant of the acts of his country. Tomoyuki Yamashita was born on November 8, 1885 in the village of Osugi, located in Japan, into a middle-class family. From a young age he decided that he would be a soldier, so he enlisted in the Imperial Army Academy to begin his military career. His aptitudes were visible to all, since in 1905, at the time of graduation, he obtained one of the highest averages in his class. He advanced through the ranks with great speed, and by 1916 he had been made a captain. After World War I, Yamashita became a specialist in Germany. He was informed about its economy, its military capabilities and its political affairs. The army sent him to the German nation to serve as an assistant to the Japanese embassy and soak up even more of daily life in the German nation. He returned to Japan in 1922 and continued his successful career, making several enemies along the way. One of these was Hideki Tojo, one of the most important commanders in the Imperial Army and the man who would become Prime Minister during World War II. As if this were not enough, Yamashita fell out with Emperor Hirohito himself. This rivalry was born in 1936, when a faction of the Japanese armed forces tried to overthrow the monarch and failed. Our protagonist begged the emperor to show mercy to the soldiers who had betrayed him and not sentence them to death. Hirohito let him know that he no longer trusted him, and sent him into a sort of exile at a minor base located in Korea. Yamashita, however, made the most of the situation, and the following year he was promoted to lieutenant general, one of the highest ranks in the army. Using his new influence, he tried to convince the Japanese leaders, who were at war with China at the time, to end the war. He was ignored, but this fact shows that he was a careful man, disinclined to initiate unforeseen military actions. Following the outbreak of World War II, Yamashita was appointed to command the Army's 25th Division, which was stationed in French Indochina preparing to attack Malaya, a territory that encompassed present-day Malaysia and Singapore. The objective of the operation was to expel British troops who were using the region as a place from which to coordinate their movements in Asia. The Japanese were vastly outnumbered. They only had 70,000 men compared to almost 140,000 English. Yamashita was aware that the only way to succeed was to attack hard and fast, and destroy their enemies' defenses so quickly that they didn't even notice what was happening. Our protagonist's strategy was an overwhelming success, culminating in the largest capitulation in British history. 80,000 British surrendered and a total of 130,000 Allied soldiers were taken prisoner. When Winston Churchill found out about such humiliation, he declared that it was the worst disaster he had ever witnessed. This feat earned Yamashita the nickname Malayan Tiger as well as enormous prestige. However, when he was in full swing, his troops committed two heinous massacres. One of them occurred at the Alexandria Hospital, located in Singapore, where there were British soldiers recovering from their injuries. The Japanese entered the establishment and, armed with their bayonets, stabbed patients, doctors and nurses. A few days later, they began a purge of the so-called anti-Japanese, which in effect was a massacre of Singaporeans of Chinese descent and anyone who opposed the Japanese occupation. Over the course of 3 weeks, thousands of men, women and children were murdered through executions not ordered by Yamashita but by his subordinates. Although it is difficult to calculate the exact number of victims, specialists estimate that they were between 25 and 50,000. In 1944, when the Axis was on the verge of defeat, the Japanese hierarchs assigned Yamashita control of 262,000 men in the Philippines, with the order to defend the territory at all costs from the attack of the Allies. This was a lost cause, as the Americans had victory within reach and were on the verge of conquering the capital of Manila. Yamashita ordered the evacuation of the city, but an admiral of the Imperial Japanese Navy disobeyed him and ordered his troops to resist until the end. This escalated into a massacre, Japanese sailors rampaging through Filipino civilians, killing hundreds of thousands of innocent people in horrific ways. They used them as human shields. There were mass violations, executions, and disembowelment. After the surrender of Japan in 1945, Yamashita surrendered to the Americans and was sent to jail. In October of that year, a U.S. military court tried him for war crimes committed by the Japanese Army in the Philippines, Malaysia, and Singapore. The general's defense claimed that many of these crimes had been committed by the Imperial Navy, which was outside of his command. On the other hand, there was also no concrete evidence that Yamashito had ordered any killings. His lawyers said that the massacres were carried out by soldiers independently, disobeying his superior. In fact, it was known that whenever the general had evidence that one of his men had committed murder or rape, he would mercilessly execute him for dishonoring the army. Yamashito even went so far as to apologize to the survivors of the massacres for the actions of his men, something no other officer had done. Let's see a statement from our protagonist during the trial. "I had hundreds of thousands of men under my command. It is impossible for any commander to control the individual actions of each subordinate. Many of the charges against me are new to me, and if I had known about them I would have punished them in time. In war there is always someone who loses, and today I am being accused of having been defeated. This same thing could have happened to the American generals if they didn't win." Ultimately, the defense was unsuccessful and the court sentenced him to death. This left an important precedent in the law of war known as the Yamashito Standard, according to which an officer is responsible for the acts of his troops. On February 23, 1946, the general was hanged on the gallows. Before dying, he thanked his captors for treating him kindly. We've reached the end of the video and we want to ask you, do you think executing Yamashita was the right thing to do? Leave us your answer in the comment box below and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to learn about many more military events that left their mark on history.